Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Charles Schulz Museum. We are excited to have a really great panel for you, and it should be a lot of fun and a lot of exciting conversation. But I'm going to first introduce Andrew Farago, the curator of the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum. His writing credits include the Looney Tunes Treasury, the Harvey Award-winning Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Ultimate Visual History, the Marvel Comics Holiday Special, The Art of Harley Quinn, among others, and of course, the complete Peanuts family album. Andrew received the prestigious Inkpot Award from Comic-Con International in 2015, and today he's going to moderate this panel of distinguished guests that I will let him introduce. After the panel, Andrew will step in our great hall where he can sign books. We do have the complete Peanuts family album for sale. And our other panelists will be available if you have questions that you don't get answered during the panel. So I would love to give everyone here a very warm welcome, and I'm going to hand it over to Andrew.
All right. Thanks very much. That's a great introduction. And to answer the first question that I'm going to get when people are going to say, how long did it take to write this book? It was about 40 years of research. If I go back from the very first Peanuts books that my sister and older brothers had, and reading the comic strips in the newspaper. So it's most of my books take about that long. I end up lucking into one book after another that's some character or concept or strip that I grew up on. So that's been a lot of fun. But yeah, let's introduce our panelists, and we'll start here with Jessica.
Hi, yes, I'm the education director here at the Charles Schulz Museum. So I guess I've put about 15 years of research now into this, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Can you hear me all right? Okay, my name's Jason Cooper. I am staff writer at Charles M. Schulz Creative Associates. So myself, along with my colleagues, we worked on the Boom comic book series, and we're doing graphic novels now, most recently Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown. A new one coming out later this year, and a lot of Simon & Schuster books. So like any sort of writing, copywriting, Peanuts-wise, kind of comes through me and my colleagues at the studio.
All right. How's my mic? Good? My name is Brian Fies. I'm a writer/cartoonist, live around here. I have a book coming out I've published 2 graphic novels before. I have a new book coming out March 9th called A Fire Story, which is about my house burning down. Some of y'all might have remembered when that happened back in 2017. So we'll be having that release party back here March 9th, so come on back. Like Andrew, I'm a lifelong Peanuts fan. I don't consider myself a scholar, but I've read them all and I have a really good memory. So, I'm just happy to be here. And I actually did this with Andrew down in San Diego at the San Diego Comic-Con last year, and it's just a fun panel. So I think you're going to like this.
And we should mention in the audience for that one was Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek.
Oh my God, so I almost died. I'm sitting at the table like this, all right? And in walks, 5 minutes before the end of our panel, getting ready for the next panel, walks Lieutenant Uhura. And she sits right down there. And so, how often in life do you get the chance? I went and I said, nice to meet you. Thank you for your work. It's been important to me. And I could have just died right then, man. Lieutenant Uhura, I'm good.
What her favorite Peanuts character was?
No, I did not.
What?
No.
Tom Gammill, I'm a TV writer. I've been at The Simpsons for 20 years, and before that I was at Seinfeld. But what I really wanted to be growing up was a cartoonist. Charles Schulz was my hero, he still is. When I was 6 years old, Happiness is a Warm Puppy was on my bedside table for years and years. When I was 10, Life magazine came out with the Charlie Brown and Snoopy cover, and that was taped on my wall for years and years. And when I was 17, Charles Schulz did the interview with Penthouse magazine, and that was under my mattress for years.
All right. Okay. Good night, everybody. That's all right. Well, we'll try to top that, but okay. So, how many of you in the audience? How many of you count Charlie Brown as one of your favorite characters?
Sure.
Okay. All right. How about Snoopy? Okay. Lucy.
No, I hate her.
Okay.
She's the worst.
All right. Okay. Well, you know what? 364 days out of the year, we talk about those characters and we have a lot of fun with them. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about Shermy. This is he's sort of the patron saint of this particular presentation, and this is Shermy was one of the first characters to kind of fade away from the spotlight.
I think he was the Pete Best of Peanuts. He was there at the beginning, and then he left, and all his friends were going, "Why did you leave Peanuts?" And he's like, "I don't know."
He went over to Henry or something, didn't he? Yeah. But he had the very first punchline.
Yeah, he was the star of the strip at the beginning.
Yeah,
Look, Charlie didn't have a zigzaggy shirt yet.
So yeah, all the dialogue, the very first Peanuts comic strip, October 2nd, 1950, all the dialogue, Shermy. And that set the tone for the entire strip. And you know, from this you'll think, okay, we're going to have 50 years of Shermy comic strips coming up, but not quite. And Tom picked out a few favorites that he wanted us to include in the slideshow today.
Yeah, in the beginning, I mean, people like Charlie Brown. Look at that, come on in. And this is his pre-zigzaggy shirt. It's very exciting when you finally see the zigzag shirt come on.
Yeah, and this is another character who, again, sort of faded away. This is Patty, not to be confused with, and we'll get to her later on. But
well, Charlie Brown in the early days, he was kind of a smart aleck too, wasn't he, Tom?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. He had an edge to him.
And Snoopy didn't live with them at the beginning, it seemed like.
yeah, so this is Shermy and Charlie Brown.
Poor Snoopy.
Right, and he and Snoopy are just acquaintances at this point.
And when you see the Snoopy exhibit out there, Charles Schulz did that joke as a one-panel, free Peanuts. If you haven't seen that exhibit, oh my gosh, it's amazing. The Snoopy exhibit out there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
also a great chance to see Shermy in real video of the actual Shermy, who was childhood friends with Charles Schulz and inspired the name of the character while not necessarily the personality. And there is an oral history video with Shermy in the Then Came the Dog exhibition, which you should really check out. I think it's fun to see the germination of all these ideas that then we get to kind of see where he went with them.
Here's Shermy, and again, Patty, not to be confused with Peppermint Patty, and we'll talk more about her.
And this was really a Charlie Brown joke before. I mean, you could have seen Charlie Brown saying this back when Shermy was running the show, though. And Shermy does not deliver it as well as Charlie Brown. Like Charlie Brown's eyebrows would look like that. It'd be a little more rounded.
Yeah, and Shermy gradually faded into the background. He was there because you needed 9 kids on your baseball team. But I got fewer and fewer lines, and Linus actually kind of took over the best friend role in the strip. And this is, of course, a picture of... Oh, no. Sorry. Charlotte Braun. This is one of the first characters to be booted from the strip, very deliberately.
Come on, it's Charlie Brown in a dress. It's very disturbing.
Well, I mean, I was wondering, when I was looking at this, what do you think the intent was with her? Was it to be someone who looks a lot like Charlie Brown but was his opposite? What was Mr. Schulz going for here?
Yeah, so this is her introduction, good old Charlotte Braun.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a play on Charlie Brown's name. And Charlie Brown is mortified to discover a girl with his name who's actually the exact opposite of him.
But then the naturally curly hair would come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels like a backdoor pilot. Like, let's experiment with adding a character to spin off. Like, no, that was a
But she just didn't work.
No, she didn't work. The naturally curly hair came back. And what I love, and this is cartoonists, like this is economy of thought. He didn't want to waste a good idea, so it's like, okay, a loud, belligerent counterpoint to Charlie Brown. Let's tone that down. Let's put those aspects with another character, Lucy, So, Charlotte Brown was this sort of prototype, like a failed experiment, and failed spectacularly, actually. And I don't know, Jessica, if you want to talk about this letter.
Yeah, Charles Schulz, actually, Charlotte Brown made such an impression. She received negative fan mail from someone specifically asking that she be removed from the strip. And Charles Schulz, this is the letter that I think was, fabulous, where he wants her to know that the guilt of the death of a child will be on her hands. But I do think the failed experiment thing is really, you're going to see a lot of characters. I think one of the many geniuses of Charles Schulz was his ability to kind of quickly realize when something didn't work and really grasp onto the things that did work. And we're going to see both of those in some of these characters. The one that, really made an impression despite their lesser known status. And then the ones like Charlotte Brown who quickly passed away.
And you can see at the bottom there, literally the X. Yeah. Okay, Miss Othmar, and that's actually a good portrait of her, right below. And we got such fabulous names in the strip. So.
And you know where the name Othmar came from? I heard this from Jeannie Schulz. Othmar was the name of one of Charles Schulz's friends, whose wife taught kindergarten to his kids. That's a very nerdy piece of trivia you would.
I think the Miss Othmar stories are just some of the sweeter pieces, one of the sweetest storylines in all of Peanuts, just because even as I read these as a kid, it was very easy to relate to both sides of this relationship of Linus just deeply in love with his teacher. And, the way Miss Schulz wrote it, you always understood that Miss Othmar was just trying to get through the day. She was just trying to do her job, just trying to go home, and this was the 57th kid in her career who's fallen in love with her. So, but he never made fun of Linus's feelings for her. It was just so sweet and just bittersweet, almost aching, that this impossible relationship that Linus was so invested in. I just think I love the Miss Othmar storylines.
Isn't there one where Linus is literally floating in air? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is every once in a while Charles Schulz would break the laws of physics. And it was always good.
Yeah. He got very heavily invested in her. Even after she got married, he was still...
He's pining.
Pining.
The rest of his life, probably.
But yeah, reading this, everyone I know learned how to read from Peanuts. And you'd hear names you'd never heard anywhere before, like Linus. And words. I remember in my family, we had never heard the word IDIOT. And my brother pronounced it idiot. And then when we finally heard it, I had never heard that word before.
Idiot. It's like a bad idea. An idiot.
Yeah.
And I love the storyline where Linus, for months, it seems like, forgets to bring in eggshells that he's supposed to bring in for class. And I never looked at eggshells the same way since that strip. Lydia. So Linus's love life is a complicated one. This is Lydia. And this is one wonderful punchline. Where Lydia, Linus was born in October, but Lydia was born in December, so she asks, "Aren't you kind of old for me?" Anyone want to weigh in on that, or do I?
The 1980s. Schulz did not introduce a lot of new characters. I think he was really focusing on the main people. And then in the 90s, a bunch of them came out. But if you look at the list of the 80s characters, they aren't that. There's Harold Angel and Maynard and Lydia, pretty much.
Whatever happened to her?
She was towards the end, I think. Like right around 98 is when she was. But it ended kind of sweetly between those two, like the last trip with them.
I think Sally scared her away.
No, it ended. I think basically the last thing Lydia asked. She sits behind Linus and she says, "Is it possible to fall in love with the back of somebody's head?" Aww. Like the whole time, Linus has been pining for Lydia, and she was playing coy. And Alexa and I call her the manic pixie dream girl of Lydia, of Linus's childhood. And then that's sort of the last sweet thing she says, and that was I think around 98. and then she was kind of her last draft.
But here's something about the genius of how Schulz drew, too. Like, he doesn't totally fill in the black in the hair. I mean, he just knew exactly where not to. Like, I always go, like, I'm not going to fill in all the black. And by the end, it's like, oops, I did it. I don't know where to. It's amazing when you look on the stripe and all the different ways he colored in. It's just so perfect.
And I hope I don't say this over and over again, but if you read my book, you'll find out that this was actually said to Schulz, and it made an impression. And again, I love talking to cartoonists and finding out almost every time I ask them about, this miserable, heartbreaking, excruciating thing that they put into their comic, and they always say, "Oh, that happened to me."
Yeah, it worked at Seinfeld, too. When I wrote at Seinfeld, it was like, I once thought I bought John Voight's car, and it wasn't. And I told that to Larry David, and he goes, that's an episode. It's like, it's great when bad things happen to you, like your house burning down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great. No. Hey, the laughs never stop, man.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was John Voight's house.
And again, it was never easy for Linus. There's another complicated relationship he was involved in. This is Truffles.
Okay, Truffles does not look like it was drawn by Charles Schulz.
No.
It looks very off-model. Like somebody came in and added that character.
Oh, it's the eyes.
It's the eyes, and look at that mouth in the third panel.
Do you think someone snuck in and just doodled a character before it went to print?
Genie.
Well, I would imagine this is some of the experimentation you were talking about before, though. He had the idea, he threw it in. If she takes off, great. If she doesn't, well, then you do something else next week, right?
Yeah. Linus had this chance encounter with her, found her house later on, and she got in a fight with Sally because it was a school field trip. Linus hid up on an icy rooftop to get away from it because he just did not want to deal with them yelling.
Did Charles Schulz do that too?
Yeah.
Is that from his life? Yeah.
I think so. And this is an amazing sequence because this is where you get Woodstock piloting Snoopy as a helicopter, and Woodstock it's revealed Woodstock learned how to fly helicopters in Vietnam, and it's just amazing, like the reality of the strip and the unreality of it. You just don't really don't know what to expect. Roy is another. He's a good guy. That's basically my description of Roy. This is him meeting Charlie Brown at summer camp.
Nice shirt, too.
Did any of our panelists go to summer camp?
Yes, yes, hated it.
And we've got another panelist coming in.
5 minutes from Stanford. Today it was 3 hours.
Yeah, the hail got you. We knew the hail got you.
Right, John Bean Hastings, everybody.
Yeah, making an entrance.
There you go.
This is going to go.
But yeah, any summer camp attendees on our panel? Anybody ever go
I couldn't
away
climb
to
a
camp?
rope, so I couldn't go.
Yeah. I had no good stories. It was just terrible.
It's terrible, yeah.
Did you make bow and arrows and stuff?
Sure, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you make wallets?
We'll talk later.
Lanyards?
Lots of lanyards.
So again, Schulz was a regular summer camp attendee, never cared for it, and he passed that on to Charlie Brown. Again, not as someone who had a hard time making friends, and we're going to talk more about that. Summer camp was rough on him, and he met someone else who's having a rough time, Roy. And Roy is one of those interesting friends in your life where he and Charlie Brown intersected for a while, and Roy's ultimate purpose was he was good friends with Peppermint Patty. So he was there to bring Peppermint Patty into the strip. She became one of the most popular, I call her later characters, but she came along in the late 60s, early 70s, and was...
From the other neighborhood.
Yes, from the other neighborhood.
Yeah, she definitely kind of brought in the era of kinder, gentler girls, giving way from Patty and Violet to Marcy and Peppermint Patty was a big shift.
You know, a friend of mine has a young kid who they watched in Charlie Brown's Christmas for the first time this year, and this boy said about the show, "Those girls are so confident." I've never seen Boston girls like that before.
So yeah, we saw less and less of Roy, but you know, and I think if we look back, I think we all have friends like that, where it's someone we knew for a little bit, and their role in our life was to introduce someone who became, you know, a very good friend. This was not a kid who made a lasting impression on Charlie Brown's life, and I'm going to click ahead so you can see the dialogue here.
And we never saw the front of his face, did we?
No.
Because that is a great back of a head drawing.
You know, you could fall in love with it.
Yeah.
It is a solid hairstyle, too.
Yeah.
So this is, terrific summer camp running gag. This is Charlie Brown's bunkmate, who is even less enthused about camp than Charlie Brown.
But look at Charlie's reaction, too. He still has his hand out. He's got the sad eyebrows. Shermy could not do that. Shermy would have blown it.
You really got a burr under your saddle about Shermy, don't you?
No, he's not as good as Charlie Brown.
Shut up and leave me alone. This is another day at camp. Love Charlie Brown's optimism. I'm going to keep reaching out. He'll open up to me.
He's getting slapped down.
And you know, this is as warm as their relationship got during camp. But we learn, and you know, this is one of the fun things about doing a daily comic strip, where you get to build, you get to revisit storylines. So he did actually. Charlie Brown made enough of an impression that this kid sent him a letter after they got back home. And of course, what does the letter say? There we go.
It is definitely a letter that Charlie Brown would get.
You know, and this was a strip that really rewarded its regular readers, because this was several weeks after the camp storyline ended. So, you know, it's funny completely on its own. But if you had read the earlier camp storyline earlier that summer, you know, this would have knocked you out of your chair.
It's a solid callback.
Right.
Hey, Mr. Sack.
And then this is the ultimate camp storyline, and I know Brian's got a lot to say about this. This is Mr. Sack, and I don't know if you can guess his secret identity, but we're gonna get into that here.
Giveaway.
And the identity came about from this mysterious rash that Charlie Brown developed. Woke up one morning thinking about baseball so much as he does that his head developed this baseball rash, and the only way around that was to wear a sack over his head.
Yeah, and this, I know that Charles Schulz was particularly proud and really enjoyed this storyline himself. It was one of, I think, his favorites.
Mr. Sack is why I'm here today. Mr. Sack. I love Mr. Sack. First of all, it's like one of the most hallucinogenic things ever in Peanuts. It's just wild stuff with the baseball-shaped rash and the ending of it, which I think you have a slide of the last one.
We'll
But I think, in my opinion, Mr. Sack is like one of Mr. Schultz's most revealing characters, because what Mr. Sack is about is Charlie Brown goes to camp, puts a bag on his head, nobody knows him, and he becomes very popular. He becomes the hero, everybody's friend, everybody loves Mr. Sack. And this was a theme that I think Mr. Schulz liked exploring. Two of his favorite works of art were The Great Gatsby and Citizen Kane, and that's a theme of those books as well, is this whole reinvention of the self-made man, the guy who starts out humbly and becomes something great through his own efforts. It asks the question, if you take a loser like Charlie Brown, you take him out of his environment, you put him in a new environment where nobody knows him, is he still a loser? I think that's a real interesting question, and I always wondered with Mr. Sack if maybe, I feel weird saying this with Jeannie sitting in front of me, maybe he felt a little bit like that himself, you know, coming out of Minnesota.
I know
where
the
he
answer.
was. Yeah? Yeah?
It's because we talked to Jeannie about this.
Yeah.
When he was a nobody before he went into
That's
the
what
Army.
I'm saying. He was a nobody.
Before he went into the Army.
Yeah.
And then in the Army he made a name of himself. He was a staff sergeant.
Yeah.
And then he when it's out of the Army, and he was a nobody again.
Well, but then he became like the most famous cartoonist in the world.
He did?
I mean,
There's a whole museum about it.
so I mean that's why I love Mr. Sack, because I just wonder if it reflects that his view of his own life story.
And I think that summer camp setting is far more equivalent to the war setting than actual summer camp. I think it really is reflective of his experience going off to war and what he experienced, during training and coming in and meeting all those people. And I think it's easy for some of us to think of summer camp as war, but I do think that's kind of more. I mean, just bringing that up, Tom, made me really see that connection even more.
About the Army?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yes.
No, you
Yeah,
don't
the
have to
Army,
convince me. I'm totally on board.
And this was an epic. This was such a wonderful, sprawling storyline. Charlie Brown becomes camp president. He's so beloved that as long as they don't know who he is, he's everybody's favorite guy at camp. And then
The ultimate imposter syndrome.
Yes.
He knows he's a loser, but nobody else does.
and when he
This
finds
is- This is a great character. It's like if Woodstock became a person or something. Did we ever see him again? Or is...
no, just the storyline. So Charlie Brown finally works up the courage to unmask. And again, the thing that triggered the rash was he woke up one morning and the sunrise looked like a baseball. And then that led to the rash. That led to this whole, and again, it's completely surreal strip.
That's just medicine. That's
Yeah.
just good science.
So he's worried that he's cracking up. So he says, "I'm finally going to take off the sack. I'm going to look at the sunrise again. And if it's a baseball, then I'm done. Like I don't know what to say." So he wakes up. He's going to see the baseball or the sun, and it's an ending nobody saw coming. Like you could not have predicted that. I hope everybody in the audience is educated enough to know who that is in the fourth panel. Alfred E. Newman, mascot of Mad Magazine.
Was anyone else bothered by this ending? I was. I don't, but it's like, I don't feel like the Peanuts world coexisted with the Mad Magazine world. It was like, Peanuts created its own, like Joe Slobotnik wasn't a real person. It seemed like a weird, and I actually asked Jeannie about this, and she said he needed a punchline.
But Charlie Brown would have read Mad Magazine, don't you think?
Well, then we would have seen it. Whenever you saw him read comic books, it just said like,
Gore and
gore. But I guess so.
Is this the only time that a other strip character appeared in?
I think so, yeah.
You also had Willie and Joe from Bill Malden's
Was he sued for the trademark violation?
I think they let it slide. There's a
What year was this? In the 60s? When was this? Do you know?
early 70s. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, there's no more beloved cartoonist in the world than Schulz. So I think they gave him a pass.
All right, fair enough.
Speaking of beloved, this character is not. This is Tebow.
I like Tebow because he's the only character with sideburns. So many of the original Schulz characters, they're dressed like from the 40s with the tie shoes and those old-timey dresses. He looks like he's from the 50s, pretty much.
Looked like he could be in Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah.
And of course, no idea how to pronounce that, which is another cool thing. Like, you feel like an idiot asking.
And this is another example of a character that he's kind of naming after someone he knows. So Roland Tebow was a friend and fellow hockey player who hangs out a lot now and still has hair that kind of looks like that.
Is he cantankerous?
Well, he's actually lovely. And I believe when the strip came out, someone went up and asked Roland, well, what do you think? Like, look how you were portrayed. Was that what you expected? And he said, I think it's hilarious. And was fine with it. But no, Roland is not like Tebow. So I guess the comparison stopped at the hair and the name.
Yeah, and Charlie Brown's obviously thrown. He thought he was being asked by Peppermint Patty to come pitch in and be on her team, but she just needed his glove. And he's thrown by, obviously, that's all you can say, Tebow. He's just stunned. And this is it's funny and sad and in a way that Peanuts often is, where Charlie Brown is so perversely thrilled that this kid thinks Charlie Brown has a haughty attitude that he just can't get over it, and he actually lets Tebow keep his glove because he just feels so special as a result of this. Okay, and sports was very much a recurring theme in Peanuts. This is a character who, again, there were some experimental characters. Truffles was mentioned as one who look like they're almost from another strip, and this is the Caddy Master.
Like he shops at the same store as Andy Capp.
Yeah, really.
And he's just there for this one story where Peppermint Patty and Marcy are caddies at the country club, and he does get slugged. That's a spoiler. One of my favorite one-off sports characters, Jose Peterson, and I was surprised when I was doing research for this book and reread all 50 years of the strip. Jose Peterson loomed so large in my mind. I thought, oh, he must have been in 10 stories. He must have been on Peppermint Patty's team and been back every summer. And no, it's 1 week of strips. Jose Peterson.
I had a huge fight. I was 10 when this came out, and I was at my friend John O'Haron's house for a sleepover, and he said it was pronounced Jose. I said it was Josie. We got in a big fight. I called my dad. You got to pick me up, take me home. I did. In the car right home, he said, no, it's pronounced Jose. And I never saw Jonathan O'Haron after that.
The Peanut strip.
What an idea.
This is sort of a
What an
this is a
idea.
recurring theme in your family, Tom. Mispronunciation of
Totally.
the written word.
Yeah. But so many people learned how to read from the strip. I know every comedy writer I did.
Yeah, so you see his batting average goes up every time he gets a hit, which is just great.
It's a nice piece of cartooning, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And
It was a way to bring in a new character and a little diversity, too.
yeah, and Schulz just thought it was funny to have a character with a mixed Hispanic Swedish background. So Jose Peterson, he just thought was a fun name. And you see Peppermint Patty's going to his house to have tortillas and Swedish meatballs later. And again, this is where the sporting life doesn't quite work out for Charlie Brown. He thought, Peppermint Patty said, I've got Jose Peterson, he's this all-star. If we join your team, we're gonna be the best team in the league. And she decides ultimately, you guys are just hopeless. You have a dog, you have Lucy. We're just, and she's right. She said, we're going to start our own team and we're going to beat everybody. And that's what they did. All right. Maui Valley, another, looks like Tom has something to say about Maui Valley.
Well, I had a theory that was based on Jeannie Schulz, because she's sort of feisty and competitive. But Jeannie said, no, Tom, it's not. There's a friend named Molly. You guys had a friend named Molly who was named after. There's no relation at all to Jeannie.
Well, I think Andrew's book actually quotes Charles Schulz as saying that this is sort of a caricature of himself at his worst, or the worst in sportsmanship all around.
Well, sports in general is an interesting theme all throughout Peanuts. I mean, because Mr. Schulz was an excellent athlete. I mean, people think he was Charlie Brown, but he was an excellent athlete. And but he always uses sports, always uses baseball and hockey and tennis to talk about teamwork and talk about perseverance and all these things that it'd be hard to bring up in maybe other ways. But sports was his way into that. Really interesting.
And it seems never to be about the game so much as the
Right.
interactions between everybody before, during, and after the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maui Valley was obviously very competitive, and she was actually softened a little bit because we got to see some characters who were way more competitive than she was. This is Crybaby Booby, and that's the only view of her you ever see in this strip. And just such great cartooning, and I definitely learned how to draw the open mouth expression from characters like this. constantly complaining, and she's actually got a brother, Bad Call Benny, who is an even worse sport.
And all of a sudden, you're feeling sorry for Molly Volley.
Look how great that chain link fence is. That's really cool. It's very hard to draw like that.
And yeah, if you followed tennis in the late 70s, early 80s, you're obviously familiar with John McEnroe, who was the bad boy of tennis, the tennis world, and wore a headband, was always arguing, trash talking. And this, but this Schulz had sweet characters too. He had got to explore all kinds of themes. This is Tapioca Pudding, whose dad is in licensing.
Also Charlie Brown and Address.
Charlie Brown and Address, yeah.
I think he guest starred in this episode.
And she's partly in reaction probably to Strawberry Shortcake, another
That's interesting.
Yeah.
very heavily licensed characters of the early 80s.
You know, there's some cool, I read in an interview, someone said, like, how did you get the idea for the name Peppermint Patty? And he said he was walking through my living room and I saw a Peppermint Patty candy bar and I came up with it. It was like, wow, that's how Charles Schulz comes up with ideas.
Yeah.
I'm going to name my character Coffee Table. But it still doesn't work as well.
And he said he actually rushed to put her in the strip because he thought some other cartoonist is going to think of this and have Peppermint Patty. And
Is that right? Oh, wow.
and there was already a Patty in the strip. She was one of the very first characters. She's sitting there next to Shermy in the first strip.
Yeah.
But there really wasn't room for Patty and Peppermint Patty, so she gradually got phased
What's
out.
the time difference between the two appearing? I mean, it's like you get 25 years. I think you're allowed to reuse a name.
Yeah. There's about a 15-year gap between them.
And they lived in different neighborhoods, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
I think we know people who have.
Well, I was careful when I was putting the panel together to make sure I didn't have two Johns or
Right.
two Brians, because that wouldn't have worked. Okay, and this Snoopy takes any opportunity for dress up. Here he is as the world famous agent. He had a lot of world famous occupations. And Tapioca Pudding ends up getting on a bus, I think, in her last appearance, and then we just never see her again. So hope she did well for herself. All right.
Yay.
555-95472. Make sure to put the accent on the 2. And this...
Everybody recognize the last name around here?
everybody around here probably knows what his last name is.
Code.
Okay, so Five came along. His agent, speaking of world famous agents, brought him into the strip at just the right time, because when they needed a character to dance in the background of Charlie Brown Christmas, he was there.
One of the most famous dancers in the Christmas.
Right
That is
place
my
at the right
go-to
time.
dance when I do
Yeah.
the dance when the music's on. The head to the side, head to the other side, head back in.
So Five
And
is
Othmar's sisters too.
yeah. Five's father just was fed up with numbers one day and had oddly enough had such a negative reaction to numbers that he named his whole family after numbers, changed everybody's names. And I don't know if Five had a name before his dad changed it to Five, if he was born with a traditional name, but he's Five.
And his sisters, right?
Sisters, 3 and 4.
Oh, there they are.
Which I love this detail
wearing my
here.
3 and
Nice
4
feminine
pin right
names.
here.
Yeah. And 3495472, and that's of course the zip code for Sebastopol nearby.
Oh, wow.
Which was where Charles Schulz probably lived at the time of this comic strip.
Do you think did fans track him down as a result of that? Did anybody do the math?
I have
I
a
think he
theory
was
about 3 and 4.
easy to track down anyway, as is the fact that, Lee Mendelsohn was able to just open up a phone book and call him back in 1960s. So he wasn't too hard to find.
No.
Or you could go to his table at the Warm Puppy Cafe.
So years ago when the book that contains 3 and 4 came out, I got this pin with 3 and 4, basically that panel up there, and I was enamored with them instantly because they reminded me of Diane Arbus's pictures of the 2 twins standing next to each other, which of course then influenced Kubrick in The Shining to have the Grady twins with 2 little girls dressed in the same thing. So when I saw this button, my mind went, oh, those are the Grady twins from the Shining.
Oh, wow.
But these guys came out first, and then Arbus did her picture, and then Kubrick. I kind of want to think that Kubrick was looking at this strip when he came up with those.
There'd be no Jack Nicholson
Yes.
without 3 and 4.
Without
And
3 and
the
4.
X from
Yeah,
that
the
was-
X. It all ties together.
Numbers, numbers, and more numbers. And again, they showed up at just the right time. So 3, 4, 5, immortalized. The strip is going to be, this cartoon's going to be on TV forever as long as TV exists.
And at the end of this panel, we're all going to do that dance, all
Yeah.
of us up there.
I love it that in the 60s, too, he was already frustrated with how everybody has to have a number to handle things. Just like now, there's a password for everything. Like, these problems are still annoying now, like the commercialization of Christmas. Think of it now. Like, even back then, he was wise enough to know that this is not a good trend.
And so oddly enough, because of this, these characters make me think of Bluto from the Popeye comic strip. And he was a minor character. He showed up at just the right time in E.C. Segar's comic strip Thimble Theater. And when the Fleischer brothers were making the Popeye cartoons, they needed a villain. So they said, we're going to take Bluto, because he's in the comic strip right now. And he was just in the one storyline, but then he was Popeye's bad guy in all of those cartoons for decades after. And 3, 4, and 5, they were in the strip at just the right time when they needed some, we need some more dancers, we need some kids to round out the
Now
scene.
they're immortal.
Now they're immortal. All right. And so we're talking about not Snoopy so much as his family. So he's got quite a pedigree.
I appreciated that.
Thanks. This is the only time we see Snoopy's dad in the strip, Father's Day. All 8 kids sign it. We don't actually see all 8 kids in the comic strip, or all of Snoopy's siblings. But there's his dad getting the Father's Day card. There's his mother. This is Spike was overseas during the war. He got sick, and his mother came in with the troops to visit him, and obviously right there, only time we ever see her. And there's obviously there are a lot of really heartfelt strips over the years too.
You can also learn a lot more about Snoopy's family in the current exhibition, Then Came the Dog. And I think Andy is just got to be one of my favorite characters, really just because of his real life backstory. And I think it's another great example. Like, to me, Andy, who's based on one of Charles Schulz, or inspired by one of Charles Schulz's actual real dogs, is one of the few characters that actually looks like the real life inspiration. And there are several photos in the exhibition downstairs, and there are photos upstairs in the recreation of Charles Schulz's studio of Andy, the real life Andy. And I feel like it's a spitting image.
Patrick McDonald, who draws the great strip Mutts, and actually there's one of his in the thing, was talking to Charles Schulz about, I don't know what to name the dog in the strip. And Charles Schulz said, well, what's the name of your dog? And he said, Earl. Well, name him Earl. That's what he did.
Yeah, so they first showed up when Snoopy was Andy first showed up when Snoopy was in the hospital. We had seen Spike before, living in Needles, California, out in the desert. And I didn't, as a kid growing up in Ohio, I did not think Needles was a real place, or that, or if it was, that it was just a flat desert.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. Olaf was introduced when the kids found out that there was an ugly dog contest, and Snoopy revealed that he had a brother who was likely to take first prize, and he did. So that's Olaf. And then this is the first time Andy shows up. And after this strip, Andy and Olaf are inseparable. They travel everywhere together.
But go back for a second. I also love the quilt in that first. That's a great quilt. And then, like, there's no sign that says hospital, but you see the little clipboard in that third panel. It's really, really cool.
And so, yeah, that's Snoopy and 3 of his brothers. Here's his sister, Belle, who lives in Kansas City.
I think I heard at a Comic-Con, Belle is big in Japan or something. Has anyone heard that?
Yeah,
I do
it
like
would be.
Belle in Japan.
And I think she's been in relatively few strips, sort of like Jose Peterson. She makes very few actual appearances, but clearly makes a huge marketing impression.
Yeah, she is one of the really the only siblings besides Spike that participates in his fantasies a little bit too. Like there's some Flying Ace strips with Belle in them.
So that's her teenage son, who Snoopy compares to the Pink Panther later on, and I think you can kind of see that resemblance.
Captured the surliness of teenagers just with the eyeballs.
Yes.
And Snoopy's brother Marbles with the marble pattern on his back and sneakers. And Marbles really only appeared in this one storyline, and again, this is an idea you can't do too many times, but just about everybody buys into Snoopy's version of reality. So if you sit on top of his doghouse and he tells you that you're flying to Wimbledon, you believe it, you go along with it. Marbles was kind of an outsider to this whole world and did not understand what was happening. So Marbles could tell that was just a shopping cart and that there were not bullet holes in the doghouse. And you really can't have this kind of character showing up too often, and this was kind of a single storyline where Marbles visited and was just confused by Snoopy's world.
Which, real life cartoonists at the time were complaining, like, why are there bullet holes in the doghouse? I remember there was an interview with Mort Walker who, how do you end a strip by just saying sigh? It's like, so there were cartoonists who were confused.
Right, Maynard.
That's not a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go through some of these characters a little more quickly. So this is Maynard. He showed up when Peppermint Patty needed a tutor. And he's Marcy's cousin. He's a very blunt character, obviously. Probably the worst possible kid to get as a tutor. And yeah, Peppermint Patty always had trouble in school. We got little glimpses into her home life, but she was very, a very well-rounded, very deep character. All right, Lila, does anyone know what her role is? Original owner, yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing Snoopy come home I don't even know how young I was, but I think I still cry, like every time I watch it.
I always find Lila very disturbing for some reason. Even when the time I was a kid, she just the idea of Snoopy having another owner somehow made him like too dog-like to me. Like I didn't like Lila. She was,
Look at that hairdo.
But what I did like about the relationship is Snoopy's incredible loyalty to her, in contrast to Charlie Brown being the roundhead kid who brings him food. He loved Lila. I don't think, if Charlie Brown had fallen on the face of the earth, I'm not sure Snoopy would have lost a lot of sleep. But he hiked 500 miles to see Lila.
And she was a terribly irresponsible pet adopter, too, like what the Humane Society discourages all the time, taking home a dog and then realizing you move and your apartment doesn't allow you to keep it. So you bring him back.
And that
Just a little girl.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
just wanted a dog. It's not her fault.
There were no adults in this decision-making process.
Yeah.
And Naomi, another very fleeting character.
Well, now it's interesting because this is from the 90s when Schulz started drawing a lot of characters who look sort of more like sort of grunge 90s characters.
Naomi may or may not play a part in our next graphic novel,
Oh, wow.
Cool.
by the way.
Spoiler. All right.
It's a hint, it's not spoiler.
Yeah. So Naomi nearly adopted Spike, but he's just too wild at this point. He could not give up life in the desert.
Gotta be free, man.
Loretta, also a little off model, if you ask me. Look like Schulz too.
Okay, and does anybody know what Loretta's holding in her hands? Girl Scout cookies, right? So Snoopy's lost in the woods. Of course, he's sure he's going to get eaten by wolves or worse. And then he finds civilization in the form of Loretta, who's selling Girl Scout cookies. And if you've been outside if you've been outside any time in the last 2 weeks, you know they're everywhere.
He's not far from a Safeway doorway right there.
Yeah.
And she showed up again at this, and again, I love the build-up. This is a long time after. This is Charlie Brown going to a party. He gets a mysterious call from a girl who wants to see him. He goes over and finds out it's Loretta who's selling Girl Scout cookies. And that's the right expression, Charlie Brown. All right, Larry, this is the minister's son, and it's one of the stranger things in all of Peanuts history is someone looked at Sally and said, "Okay, you should teach Sunday school." Like of all the kids, of all like everybody.
Great Gatsby.
Yeah. This is great. You get to work Great Gatsby into it. But unfortunately, again, it's Sunday school, so a kid who will not stop talking about the green light at the end of Daisy's Dock is not. It's not the time or place. And Sally actually got in trouble because she had to kick him out of class, and that's when she found out that he was the minister's son and that he really should not have done that. Harold Angel. All right. And this is, every time I see him, I'm taken right back to my parents' living room because I remember the week the strip came out. Harold Angel, again, Sally, this is why you would question having her as a teacher. She talked about her role in the school Christmas play where she yells, "Hark," and then Harold Angel sings. And Linus and Charlie Brown, knowing Sally, said, "Well, you're obviously mistaken. This is not. I think you're confused about this." And then, lo and behold, Christmas Eve, Harold Angel shows up at their door, and I think they had to give Sally a really extra big Christmas present that year to make up for it. And he showed up briefly as kind of a rival for Sally's affections, although I'm not sure if Linus considered him a rival or not, but he did show up a few more times after this. All right, and this is a Joe Schlabotnik rookie card. And as somebody who, kind of did the same thing, like I gravitated toward the less popular baseball players because I would get a cool baseball card, and this guy's my favorite, even though he's been sent down to the minors, even though he's been cut from the team, demoted to equipment manager. Charlie Brown is devoted, and I love that you get about 100 baseball players name checked in this strip here.
Well, you also get a feeling through the Joe Schlabotnik storyline that Joe really appreciates it. Like it breaks his heart a little bit that there's this kid out there who just loves him that much. I like that. And again, working at kind of two levels, kind of you can see the kid's perspective because the strip's all about the kid's perspective, but you get this little glimpse of what that must look like from the adult side too. It's really cool.
And Charlie Brown threw a testimonial dinner for him.
Right.
He again followed his career as he got demoted. He got demoted to manager of a minor league team. He got fired for very questionable on-field.
Didn't he get
calls.
lost on the way to the dinner too? So he missed the dinner.
Yeah,
It's
it was
like a grown-up Charlie Brown. Like
yeah,
Charlie Brown
yeah.
in the,
So it's obvious why they connected. Miss Helen Sweet Story, Snoopy's favorite author of the 6 Bunny Oneies books. And does anyone know what happened that put Snoopy off of these books? What he learned about Helen Sweet Story?
Cats.
The cats.
Yeah. So yeah, when he finds out that she has 24 pet cats. horrified. And that's such a wonderful drawing of Snoopy in that last panel.
You really see him so like shocked like that. It's a great drawing.
Right. Okay, so we're gonna do rapid fire here. Here's Peggy Jean. So this is it was one of Charlie Brown's romantic successes in the comic strip. And she thought his name was Brownie Charles because he got confused when he introduced himself to her. But it wouldn't be Peanuts if the strip ended happily. So they,
Was this lake based on anything in real life that Schulz would go to? Do we know?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So they come back to camp for a reunion and find out, she's got another boyfriend, and Charlie Brown has to call home to hear Snoopy's friendly voice.
Just two strips ago was the cookie strip, and it just reminded me. I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but I remember when that came out, and I was working at a job with human beings, but that became like the byline. It became a cultural thing to talk about. I just want a cookie. What do you, how's your day going? I just need a cookie. And I love the idea that pretty late in Peanuts' run, that it could still kind of penetrate the culture like that, just a little bit, that people at work would talk about, and it would become this little touchstone, this little phrase that was just like a little grace note in people's day. It was very cool.
Brian worked at Mrs. Field.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So no more cookies.
Emily, who's Charlie Brown's dance partner, and there's a question of whether she's real or not, which is an interesting.
She looks a lot like Peggy Jean, doesn't
Yeah, he's got a type.
More Gatsby.
Another great Gatsby reference. Joe Agate. This is a time that Charlie Brown actually gets to be a hero. Joe Agate is a mean kid who plays marbles for keeps with little kids, and that's something you just don't do.
And there's a great storyline because Charlie Brown beats him.
Yeah, he's the clear-cut hero in this strip.
Spoiler
He comes
alert,
in,
Oh, sorry.
challenges Joe Agate, plink, 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 wins all the marbles back, and just like a Western hero, gives Rerun his marbles back. So I love this one because this is a clear-cut win for Charlie Brown. He also seems to score a win here against Roy Ann Hobbs. If you've read The Natural or saw the movie, you'll know that's a reference to Roy Hobbs. So this is 1993. Charlie Brown gets to hit a game-winning home run right before April Fool's Day, but not on April Fool's Day. I think that was very. He was very careful to make sure this did not happen on April Fool's Day. That triumph.
I cut the strip out and hung it on my bedroom door when it came out in the paper.
It was a big deal. Sports Illustrated reported on it. They actually printed the strip. They mentioned this was a milestone. But then he meets Roy Ann Hobbs, granddaughter of Roy Hobbs, whose life is ruined because she gave up a game-winning home run to Charlie Brown. And later she acknowledges that Roy Hobbs is a fictional character. So again, just the question of reality in the strip is right out there.
Again, this is another 90s grunge period character.
Grunge.
The goose eggs. This is another interesting moment in Charlie Brown's life. This is when, whenever characters look up to him, it's always interesting. Mr. Sack. But you've also got the goose eggs, who meet him by knocking him unconscious. He's running away from home because of complicated story.
He bit a tree.
He bit a tree, so there are people after him. So he's running away from home. So he gets bonked on the head, and love this. We're looking for an older person to coach our team. Do you know anything about baseball? And so he loves this. He embraces the role of mentor, coaches their baseball team. You get this strange ending where he's sleeping in a cardboard box at the field because he can't go home yet. I worry about his parents in this strip. Like what must be going through their heads. And per Tom's request, this is a classic character, the skull.
Yeah, I love this skull character.
School had a real love-hate relationship with Sally. Did you want to talk about that?
Oh, just having a building as a character, I think, is pretty cool. And like the stone wall was important too.
Yeah.
Walking along and
But it never talked.
no, it never talked.
Although the pitcher's mound did, Charlie Brown's baseball glove occasionally had opinions. Yeah, so I mean, Sally initially was very, very reluctant about going to school, but and the school even had a nervous breakdown at one point and fell apart. But you know, they grew to accept each other. And yeah, this is our last character. It's the little red-haired girl, and yeah, I was thrilled to see the original strip for this is actually on display right now in the little red-haired girl exhibition.
Yeah, this is a great example of. I think did we start talking about Andrew? I think you mentioned terrible experiences and inspiring great comedy, and the whole story behind the little red-haired girl is upstairs in our small changing gallery, and the inspiration is the absolute unrequited love and the relationship Charles Schulz had with someone who didn't accept his marriage proposal. It was all upstairs, so definitely check that out before you leave if you haven't yet.
And I'll mention my book only talks about the characters who appear in the strip. So even though we've seen versions of the little red-haired girl in animation, this is as much of as you see of her in the book. I don't talk about the Snoopy's siblings who are in the animated specials but aren't in the strips. So as far as my book was concerned, it was just the world of the comic strip.
And he never named her in the strip either, did he? In the animation, she was Heather, right? But he never mentioned her name in the strip.
Yeah, and I think just never showing her in the strip is just, again, just like that mark of the incredible genius behind the strip, that she was so much more powerful not ever having been pictured. Whatever whoever she was, whatever we wanted to imagine her as, it was so much more powerful to never have her there. And I think Charles Schulz did say that he was regretful that he allowed her to be shown in animation, just because you kind of break that fourth wall with her. And it's just great that we never ever see her in the strip.
It's like the inside of the doghouse.
Yeah.
You see that too.
And I should mention that Vicky Scott drew a really wonderful cover here, and she does not get enough credit for that. These are you're gonna lose the game if you try to guess who all these characters are, because some of them she invented. So don't kill yourself reading through the book trying to figure out who's this kid and who's that kid, because some of them are just in the Peanuts style, like just variations on classic characters.
Yeah, thank you for hanging in there with us. And Andrew, everyone will step outside into the Great Hall. So if you have questions of any of the panelists, and we do have the book, so you can go home and learn all about the characters. Get ready for Peanuts trivia coming this summer to the Schulz Museum. And thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Andrew, for putting us together.